that for 20 years.
Okay.
We could have done this inside.
Guess we got to get Murph on that. Okay. All right. You ready to go, guys? Okay. Obviously, a little bit of a different background for us this year relative to last year. We don't have the mountains, but it does not diminish the excitement that we have for opening training camp this week. I always say it's a little bit like the first day of school because all your players are back in the building, your coaching staff, your support staff. It's really great to it's really great to see everyone. I want to commend Kevin and his staff, as well as our medical and performance groups, for the offseason program that they put together. I thought it was chock full of competition and really filled with very rigorous work. And it's been great to see that continue through the early parts of camp, and obviously we're really excited for day 2. Before I open for questions, I want to talk a little bit about Quinshon's situation. I'd start by saying that anytime not just a player but a member of your organization is involved in a legal situation, and particularly one that involves allegations of domestic violence, you lose a ton of sleep over it. And you lose a ton of sleep over it not just because of the seriousness of the allegations, but also because of the amount of time and energy you spend really vetting any person who comes into your organization. And then probably for us in the past 2 years in particular, the amount of time and resources we spent on the education part of it, with our not just with our players but with our whole organization. When this happens with a player, obviously these incidents, they become very, very highly public, and our view is our primary responsibility, our initial responsibility as an organization, is to gather as much information, and particularly quality information, as possible. Rarely, even though it's a highly public incident, rarely does all the information become public or easily accessible. Which is why it's so important for us to work through the legal process, work with investigators, obviously communicate and share information with the league. But it's not until that time that we get enough information and enough quality information that we will determine or decide the next steps of what to do with that, with the player or the employee. So in terms of Quinshon specifically, we're still gathering information. Sometimes that process occurs quickly. Sometimes the information comes a little bit more slowly, but we're still in really probably the information gathering stage with him. That, and given the fact that he's still in an active legal situation, there's not much that I can comment specifically on his case at this point. But as we get to the point where we have enough information to determine the next steps, we will certainly do so. The last thing I'll say before I open it up to you all is, look, we don't want to be up here on day one, talking about this. Our players don't, our coaches don't, our fans certainly don't. Shoot, I don't think you all do. And so, we're going to obviously, deal with that situation on a day-to-day basis as appropriate. But our focus, will really be on, preparing the team for our opener against Cincinnati in September. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
You have to wait until his Quinshon's legal situation is resolved before you sign him.
Jeff, I'd say in Quinshon specifically, it's it's to be determined. Right? We are still gathering information. So in terms of those decisions, signing, being at camp and everything like that, it's honestly probably too early to make any type of determination. So as we gather information, we'll have a better view on that.
Is not signing him or letting him go, is that on the table?
I'm sorry?
Is not signing him or letting him go, is that on the table?
Dan, the way I would say is I have learned in many of these off-field situations not to go too far into the future. We'll deal with the day-to-day. You end up using a lot of sort of mental energy in terms of hypotheticals and things of that nature, and rather we'll focus on getting the information and then making the right decisions
So
from there.
were you satisfied with your vetting process with them?
Yeah, I'll tell you this, Tony. Like for all of our players, we spend a ton of time and energy, use a variety of sources, background legal to make sure we understand the people. Like any process, like you always look to refine it. You always look to improve it. And one of the things that we've probably looked through in, I'd say, this space in general, is really like the education process. Like one thing that we've learned is with domestic violence issues, there's no target population, target demographic, target history. And one of the things that we want to make sure that we do with all members of our organization is provide the resources, support, and education so that all of them can have safe, healthy domestic partnerships.
Andrew, I know, looking back at the last 2 years, this is the third player that has faced something like this. You've had Devin and Mike Hall too. I guess just what more do you feel like you guys need to be doing? Is there a concern that this is a pattern that guys feel like is acceptable?
Yeah, I definitely don't think guys view it as acceptable. Actually, one of the things that we had done over the summer, probably over the past couple of summers, is talk to a number of experts in this area, and it probably goes to to Tony's question in terms of the education piece for us, where there isn't always necessarily a pattern in terms of the demographic of the population, and the incidents can take a variety of forms, not necessarily speaking to like our specific players. And so that really kind of led to our approach to really kind of ramp up the education to make sure that there was enough awareness, strong awareness, and honestly, so guys realize like it's not just this could be someone else type problem, and how important it is to have the tools ready for healthy relationships and good partnerships.
Andrew, go ahead. What does specific programming and resources look like in that regard for this organization? What are some of the things you guys have implemented?
Yeah, so in 2024, we invited Sabrina, Greenlee. She spoke about her story directly to our guys. We actually invited Lisa Friel, who's the Senior Vice President, Special Investigations for the NFL. She obviously sees all these incidents across the league, to talk to and educate our guys. We actually, replaced that education module because you have a couple mandates from the league, but we thought Lisa and her team would actually be more effective in that space. We also added a module, regarding sextortion and some of the situations in that case to make sure that our guys understand, what these situations can look like and what are the proper resources and tools so that they can make sure that we have the behaviors that quite honestly are acceptable in the community.
Andrew, last year, Mike Hall was back out there on the field the day after his arrest in Avon, and so I'm wondering, did you guys learn from that? Was that too soon? And if that was the case, so be it. But why is this situation so different, where it's taking so long to figure out what's going on?
So Mary Kay, that probably goes back to what I talked about earlier in terms of the information that we had at the time. All these situations are different and unique, and the information that we had at the time with Mike was different than Quinshon. The other thing I'd add is any decision for follow-up, whether it's reintegration or discipline or removal from team activities, those decisions aren't made in a vacuum. Those aren't football decisions. They're with a variety of people that have different expertise, many of whom aren't in football operations. So each situation is different, and I would be, I don't think you should necessarily map one to the other.
Is the league involved in this process in sort of helping you guys determine what the right course of action right now is with Quinshon?
you always stay in communication with the league, so like there is some natural dialogue, but honestly, like the league's role is probably more in in any potential investigation or vetting as opposed to that.
So Andrew,
Let me go here and then I'll go to you, Daryl.
so Andrew, is the framework of a contract there because a logjam of second-round picks is resolved? It's just there's a pause on it on both sides.
Yeah, I'd say like in general, obviously the second round was unique this year. Now it's pretty well slotted. Whether there's a formal framework in place, like maybe the technical answer is no, but in terms of where that slot should land, that's pretty straightforward. Go ahead, Daryl.
How confident are you? Did you go through like your vetting process and going across the country doing research on just a wide range of guys? How confident are you that the information that you're receiving, especially from the red flag character portion, you're getting the full picture, you're getting an accurate picture? I understand that you're talking about employment and there's some sensitivities in there as well, but like, do you feel like that people are being open and honest with you when it comes to some of these prospects in the pre-draft information you're gathering?
Yeah, I think a big part of the pre-draft process is knowing, who the reliable sources are. But Daryl, when we talk about vetting, it's not about just flying in, talking to a position coach or talking to a support staff. Pretty extensive legal checks, pretty extensive background checks, whether that's with compliance office on campus. We actually employ a third-party company that does all of our security and background. So everything from if a guy has a speeding ticket to something more serious, that's something that's accessible to us. That being said, it's funny, we had Monty McNair in for we used to call it Scout School. It's a football operations summit. Former general manager of the Sacramento Kings, and we were talking about background process. How did you guys go about it with the Kings? And he was saying one of the things they study is just like anything else, it can be noisy. Like to your point, where it's like, okay, how many guys that we identified as, let's say, tough or smart or whatever ended up actually being that, and the reality that in their sense, things change. But to get back to the broader point, Daryl, it is important to we have a large web of sources. It is important to know who's reliable, but to leave it at just maybe hearsay is the wrong term, but to leave it at just an interview on a campus with a coach or an academic advisor, that's not nearly enough, and we use way more resources than that.
Name,
Let me do Scott first, and then I'll do you, Tony.
from a football perspective, Andrew, I mean, you spent the 36th pick on the draft on him, and we don't know. You don't know when he's if he's gonna be, when he's gonna be. So how big a blow is that, especially to an offense that wants to recommit to the ranking?
I'd say this: we'll deal with that day to day, and we'll see where we shake out in that position room. I think we're excited for a number of individuals who are in that room, and we kind of really want to see how things play out, certainly in the short term, before making any quick judgments or assessments.
Speaking of speeding tickets, what was your opinion of those 2 excessive speed violations?
Not smart. Just not smart, and it's something that we've addressed with him. He understands the implications. He understands the consequences. And I think the thing is, it's not just about yourself, right? It's not just about having a joyride. It's not just about driving a car really fast, but it's about the fact that you can endanger other people. It's about the fact that if a deer or someone cuts out in front of you, your reaction time, it's just dangerous. And it's not something that we want our guys to be doing. It's not something that they should be doing. And the number one reason is because we don't want some type of catastrophic accident. We saw that 2 years ago in, what was it, Dallas or Houston with a player. And in that incident, everybody was lucky to walk away. And we don't want that occurring with anyone in our organization.
Andrew,
on football, quarterbacks. Do you see a pathway to have 4 on opening day roster?
I do.
Is that, in light of the asset that a quarterback is, or having 69 with the practice squad, you can kind of hide?
I'd say this is like we've largely looked at the last 5 spots for roster as more developmental spots, and that can come from any position. I also think with the roster flexibility nowadays, especially with like the elevations that you're able to have on the practice squad, there's just more flexibility in terms of how to build your 48 man game day roster, where it's maybe not as quite as restrictive in the past. Now that being said, when roster rules were more, let's say, draconian, there have been teams that have carried 4. So if there are 4 that are 53-man worthy, and we think it makes the most sense for us to keep, then we will.
Andrew, as you progressed throughout your GM career here, do you think your philosophy on players with character concerns has shifted at all? Have you become less adverse over the years?
I wouldn't say that, Nate, that I've become, just you said, less adverse. I'd say, honestly, like, that typically has not been a well where we want to dip into it aggressively. Now, what issues, like, I think character can at times be a very broad term. Like, what issues that we think that we can support. I should say that's maybe more what weaknesses we say we can support. Like whether a guy has, a mental concern or some issue with, life skills, things like that. Those are things that we can support. But, players with maybe more serious issues, like we typically haven't had an appetite for those guys.
Andrew, when it comes to decision on the starter, I wanted to ask, like, will that solely be Kevin's decision? And I want to frame it in the context of you already acknowledged that you required an extra first-round pick in that draft that's supposed to be stronger quarterback. You have 2 rookie quarterbacks. Most people would just stay able to move you to like see what you have in those guys, as opposed to putting Joe or Kenny out there. So like, how will you as the general manager kind of
That's good. It's a good question, right? Like, because look, it's called what it is. There like at times is maybe a little bit of tension in terms of future versus present. But like that's really not the way that we look at it, Daniel. We look at it as like, hey, let's have all these guys out there. Let's see how they perform. Let's see what their strengths and weaknesses are, and build an offensive support around the starter when Kevin's ready to name it. I would say more generally to your question, Kevin and I might be the only ones who talk more about the quarterback position than you all, throughout the next couple weeks, and it's something that we'll talk about consistently. I think you guys know us well enough that we work really well together in that regard. But at the end of the day, like I trust Tim. You know what I mean? Like I trust his discretion. I trust our coaching staff in terms of who they want to play, and I think we'll get a lot more information over the upcoming weeks.
We're going to take a couple more.
Andrew, along the lines, going back to running back, I know you said you're excited about the guys that are here in that room, but is there any thought to, especially this time of year when you've done a lot of bodies in camp, potentially adding anybody to the roster?
If there's a player that makes sense, of course, like, and that would be across any position. In terms of, let's say, the more like tactical of like functioning through camp or getting through the next several days, I think we're in a good spot. We'll hopefully be in an even better spot as like we work through a couple minor tweaks and injuries, things like that.
Andrew, you won 3 games last year. So what are realistic expectations for this team? It was not a real good product to watch or anything like that.
Yeah, and Terry, I think I probably tell you every year when we do the interview before week 1. Every year is unique. Every year is different. It's not. I was reading something. With my former team, the Eagles, where they were bristling at the notion of being called defending champions and saying like, hey, we're not defending anything. That was 2024. We're in 2025. And that's right. Like that's the case. We see it every year in the NFL. I think right now, Terry, like our mentality is let's learn this team during training camp. Let's get good, meaningful, competitive reps. Let's see how young players can progress. Let's determine roles, and then we'll go from there. The expectation talk, things like that. That'll be a conversation for another day. I'm sure I'll have just as unsatisfying of an answer, but we're really looking forward to really doing the work and dealing with it on day-to-day
But I mean,
basis.
you've put.
We got three more.
You put the roster together, and
Mhm.
you looked at what was last year, and you brought in these guys for this year. When you look at this, why would you think it's going to be better?
Yeah, I think, Terry, that we are very optimistic about a number of the players that we have on the roster. Quite honestly, I really like where our offensive scheme and our offensive coaching staff is. And I think like the benefit of having a lot of young players that are likely, we'll see how the roles shake out, but get more playing time is there are a wide range, really quite honestly, in both directions of outcomes for that specific spot. So I think this is a year where we have the opportunity to see a lot of growth with some of the players who are going to be given and earn new opportunities. But like I said, we're going to be focused on the work.
Will you personally attend Texas Ohio State camp?
I'm sorry?
Will you attend the Texas Ohio State camp?
I can't tell you all my secrets, Tony.
Mary Kay?
Andrew, I wanted to ask you about your two PvP guys, and Mike Hall and Deshaun.
Mhm.
Can you give us an update on when you think those guys might be ready to go?
So I tried to do this well last year, and I was so wrong in terms of what I told you guys that I'm sorry this year I'm going the day-to-day route. Like I just like and like yes, we have an idea in terms of when we think they may hit the field. I have just learned by just being so wrong on that with the tackles last year that I'm gonna go the GM speak day to day, and we'll see how they go.
So just to follow up on that, to follow up on that, so you put JOK on the season-ending pup.
Correct.
So does this mean that you have hope that Deshaun will be contribute to you this sometime on the field?
Jeff, I'd say like we're dealing with Deshaun and Mike on a day-to-day basis. JOK's admittedly just like it's just a unique situation, with his injury. So that's a lot different than the other PUP guys. Daniel?
No, I was just gonna ask about Deshaun as well. I mean, I was gonna say like, you in the initial statement, you guys said he's gonna miss most of the season.
Mhm.
So if that hasn't changed, like, how likely is it? How feasible is it that he really can't play this season?
We'll see day to day.
Last one, Chris?
Andrew, you said there's a possibility of keeping all four. 2 years ago, you were in a position where you traded away a veteran, and then what transpired, and it kind of put you in a bind where you were forced to play a young guy. Do you, if you're in kind of the same spot, how much does that, what you went through in 23 kind of
inform 25? Yeah, it's a good question, Chris. I think the main difference in that year is we were at 3. So I think I've said multiple times on the record that as long as we have 3 quarterbacks that we think are 53-man worthy, we'd like to keep 3. That was a situation where we felt like the opportunity, again, kind of wrestling with a little bit the short term versus the long term, was too good to pass up. Was too good to pass up in 2023, and we were able to manage it and obviously make the playoffs and everything. But that's maybe a little bit different than where we sit today. If like we're in a situation and we receive some trade offer for one of the guys and we're sitting with 4 guys on the active roster, that might be a different set of conversations and considerations than if we were having 3 planned until literally like the last week of the preseason. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot, Eric.
Yep.